religious person. I can't call myself a religious person. I'm not particularly devout. I don't go to temples frequently. I don't participate in religious rituals. Not that I'm an atheist. It's just that I'm not irreligious either. It's just that I perhaps don't have the interest or the inclination. But thanks to my upbringing, I would certainly call myself as someone who is cultural. I see a lot of value in culture. I see a lot of value in holding on to your roots to some extent, because that is what gives you your identity. One of the pet peeves that I have chosen for myself over the last few years is to free temples from government control. Most people assume that this is an elitist cause. Most people assume that the cause of the temple is effectively the cause of the Brahmin, or it is the cause of one caste or one community. As far as I'm concerned, that institution belongs to everyone who falls within the Hindu fold. And therefore, if you're trying to free temples from government control, you're not fighting the cause of one particular caste or community, but you're fighting the cause for an entire faith, for an entire value system, for a group of communities, so to speak. India is a secular country. Is that the assumption? Yes or no? At least on paper. If it is a secular institution, if it is a secular country, therefore the state is supposed to maintain a distance from religious institutions. Yes or no? Yes. If that is the answer, isn't the state supposed to maintain a distance from all religious institutions? Therefore, the amount of control that the state exercises over religious institutions of different faiths must be at least similar or the same? Yes. Do you have an endowments board for mosques? Do you have an endowments ministry for churches? Do you have an endowments ministry for gurudwaras? Do you have an endowments ministry for synagogues in this country? Then why do you have an endowments ministry for only Hindu religious institutions? By having a dedicated ministry that chooses to exercise control over the religious institutions of only one faith, either you're violating the concept of secularism after claiming for yourself this concept called secularism, that you're a secular country, or while you call yourself a secular country, you operate like a Hindu state, because a state that interferes with Hindu institutions can only do so if it believes that it is Hindu in character. These are the only two options available to you. So either embrace your Hindu character and yet treat everybody equally, or remain true to the concept of secularism and stay equidistant from all institutions. If you choose to straddle on both the boats, you don't do justice to either of the boats. That is the simple concept. When you ask for freedom of Hindu religious institutions from state control, you're not making a statement against any other community. You're not attacking any other faith. You're only attacking the state for its hypocrisy. Ask any member of my generation, or perhaps this age bracket of 18 to 25, and you ask them, what is it about a temple that you hate the most? The one thing that comes out automatically as an instinctive response or an intuitive response, you have to pay money for some of these queues. Why do I have to pay money to have access to the deity? Why do you have these special lines? Why do you have these special queues? But then you ask them, so who has imposed this structure? Who has imposed this rule? Most people won't even be aware of the fact that it is the state which has imposed payment-based queue system across the board in all temples. So if you go to some of the popular temples in Tamil Nadu, today a payment-based queue system has gone to the extent where if you need a special darshan, you need to pay close to 2,000 rupees, 3,000 rupees, or 5,000 rupees. Are you aware of this temple called the Subramania Swami temple in Tiruchendur? Very popular. It's on the beach. From 500 rupees to 700 rupees, now the special queue system has gone to 1,000, 2,000 and 3,000. The community is rebelling, but the state continues to impose that particular structure. But who takes the blame for this? The community takes the blame, and the institution takes the blame for being money-minded. What happens when the state chooses to drive a wedge between two different communities? By making one community the subject of exercise of its control, uses its resources in the name of secularism to feather everybody else's nest. How is it that when it comes to these resources, it is everybody's money? I'm sorry if it sounds narrow, I'm sorry if it sounds parochial. I'm completely open to the resources of this community being used for everybody else's benefit, so long as their resources are also available for everybody else's benefit. The simple basis or the principle on the basis of which you operate is reciprocity. I will do to you what you will do to me. Is this unreasonable? Is this illogical? Am I saying something that is communal? Am I saying something that is fascist? Am I saying something that is bigoted? Logic is perhaps the better way to approach a proposition as opposed to emotion and rhetoric. So I'm merely testing the validity of my proposition on the basis of logic. These are questions which you have to ask. Tirupati with its resources, is it capable of not investing in free education, free basic education for members of the Hindu community, at least in Tirupati? Is it possible or not? It's possible. Then what stops it from investing those resources in them, in the community? When you know for a fact that conversion is on the rise in and around those districts, and money is a problem as far as people living in that particular area is concerned, is it not possible for this particular institution, which is supposed to be the richest temple in the world, or the richest religious institution in the world, to invest in the community? But does it have a say in who can use its resources? The institution has no say. Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam had a separate act before 1987. Post 1987, when the HRC legislation of Andhra Pradesh was amended, pursuant to recommendations by Justice Challakondaya Committee, the TTD administration was merged with the HRC administration. And there is a specific chapter that deals with it. Anybody who thinks that this legislation is only meant to regulate and restrict and to ensure that there is no corruption fails to realize that wherever there is state, there is bound to be corruption. That is the reality. Are you telling me that state as an institution whose corruption is there for you to see on a daily basis in every newspaper is the single institution in which you will put your faith with respect to the resources of your community? Doesn't make sense at all. When tens and thousands of crores of rupees are involved, are you saying that the Indian state, regardless of whoever is in power, whichever party is in power, is capable of running that institution without corruption? Is that even possible? Yes or no? The second largest owner of real estate in this country is the church. Please tell me, do you think it is impossible for any kind of corrupt dealings in the church when it comes to the kind of land it holds? Is it inconceivable? Yes or no? It is possible, right? Does the state choose to interfere with the activities of the church citing corruption? Then why is it that you choose to make an example only out of this community, as if corruption is peculiar only to this community? There are close to 39,000 temples in the state of Tamil Nadu alone. And there are over 400 temples which have been notified by UNESCO as places of heritage, world heritage, global heritage. Out of these 39 temples, 38,265 temples are under government control. So is this the assumption that 38,265 temples require the presence of the state? And do you know what is the income of these places? Less than 10,000 a year. That is less than 800 rupees a month. What corruption are you talking of in an institution that can't even earn 800 rupees a month? What business does an executive officer or the state officer have in such an institution? If the state chooses to appoint people who shall be the trustees of the board, can you call it an independent institution? Is there a distinction between appointment and election? Yes or no? Election would mean community participation. Yes or no? Appointment would mean zero community participation. Yes or no? Your trustees are appointed. They are not elected. Trustees of every other institution, of every other faith are elected. The Gurudwara elects its own trustees. The Waqf elects its own trustees. I want parity in treatment. I want equality in treatment. The Supreme Court is so obsessed with equality these days. I am asking for equality in treatment. I am asking for the same equality to be applied as far as this group of institutions are concerned. How many of you are aware of the fact that temple at one point of time used to be the institution for lending money, used to function as a bank? The trade guilds were established from within temples. It is important to reinforce the centrality of this institution called temple in the lives of people. Not to make them religious, but to at least make them cultural to some extent. Tomorrow, the government decides that notwithstanding the fact that this is a privately run institution, we will tell you how you're supposed to run your place. Would that be acceptable to you as far as this particular institution is concerned? If it is not acceptable to you when it comes to a private institution such as this hostel, which is run by a certain community, how are we so comfortable with the state interfering with our temples? How is the example any different? How is the situation any different? The temple at the end of the day is more than a religious institution in the life of an average Hindu. Have you ever wondered why is it that this institution and communities associated with this institution have been the subject of repetitive attacks whenever there's been an invasion or whenever there have been attempts at conversions? Because at least to the person who is a non-Hindu, he has identified that this is the institution that plays a central role in the lives of an average Hindu. So if you choose to go after this nerve center, if you choose to go after this particular institution that plays a vital role, it is bound to have a domino effect on the community. The strategy as far as India is concerned has been no different from the African experience. Demonize indigenous traditions, call them the devil, call them the Satan, shame them when it comes to their traditions and beliefs. And when the cup is empty and it has been emptied of local thought, you fill it with foreign thought. When your house help needs money, or when your security guard needs money, or when your driver needs money, please realize he is in that vulnerable position where he has opened himself up for predatory proselytization and conversion. Because you're never in that shoes, you're never in that situation, you're never in that circumstance. It is easy for you to say, how can he convert for the sake of a few thousand rupees? For him it is important. Only when temples choose to dedicate their resources for the benefit of the community and they invest in the community, they will strengthen the community from within. There is no point in blaming the outsider or someone who doesn't belong to your faith as long as there are weaknesses within your own community. You can blame the thief for having the intent of entering your house, but keeping your house open without a lock is your problem, it's your mistake. And it's your stupidity. So if you need resources to ensure that people are educated, that they don't struggle to provide at least basic education to their own children, you need resources, but your resources are in whose control? State control. And that is precisely why you need to free Hindu institutions from state